All right, so we are back with another step on this table view project that we've been working on. This favorite comics app that I'm putting together. If you watch the first three videos, those walked through just the absolute basics of getting the table view onto your app. It doesn't really do anything, it just kind of shows up, it populates, and that's great. It's a lot of steps to get to that point. So now what we want to do is we want to actually create a table view that navigates. So it goes from our table view here to some other screen, and what shows up on the screen is determined by what we click on the table view. Um, Much like I did towards the end of the third video, I want to go ahead and do a little cleaning, a little bit of chores to kind of make sure that everything looks really nicely. I want to point out that on our storyboard, um, we have two different view controllers. One of them has a name, the other one does not. We're actually going to have a third screen on here as well later on, and so this should not just be view controller. So let's go up here to this file. We're going to click that, we're going to hit enter, and then we're going to rename this something more useful. So this is actually going to be our detail view controller, because that'll be the view controller where we see detail from our comics. Yes, I continue to be super original with my naming. Within here, we want to change a couple of things up here in the descriptor. It's also called this detail view controller. And then here, the name of the class, we're going to change to detail view controller. Great. Now, before you move on, you will notice that this file is grayed out. If you do not want to spend the next hour and 15 minutes figuring out why your program is broken later, like I just did, you want to come up here, click Save. Alright, so then you're going to go to Main Storyboard. From here, you're going to click on this view controller. Notice it has no assistant. It's because this doesn't exist anymore. We want Detail View Controller. And look, it shows up right there in our assistant. While we've got this open, we're going to make a couple small additions to this view controller. What I want to do is later on we are going to bring in information from the table to this scene, and in order to do that I'm going to actually say whatever comic I pick from here I'm going to put here. So I'm actually going to have an object here, and it's just going to be called comic, and it's going to be of type, and remember we have that class called comic, so we're going to take in a comic when we switch to this view controller. Secondly, while I'm here, you'll notice I've already got image view pulled up right here. I want to put an image onto the storyboard, and I'll adjust that later. But right now, I'm also going to bring in an outlet here, and this is going to be detail comic image. It's an outlet, image view, perfect. We're going to make that connection. All right. So now mark is going to show up because we are going to mark that this is our properties and include that here. Great. So now let's go to our standard editor. So we're just looking at this. Right now, I know that I want to get from the screen to the screen. That means that I need some sort of navigation. So let me click on this guy. I'm going to click up on the dock, and you see it highlights the TableView controller. And I want editor, embed in navigation controller. And now let's notice a couple of things. First off, navigation controller showed up. A little gray bar appeared at the top. That's our navigation bar. That's actually going to show up at the top of all of our screens that show up in our navigation controller. That gives us a back button, that gives us a title, it gives us a bunch of things. So like right now, let's add a title. This is our comic, comics list. Don't worry if you can't see that. I really can't either, so I hope it says comics list. Hey, it does. So we're going to add that. Also notice that this storyboard entry point moved to the beginning of the navigation controller. The navigation controller is a container that we put all of the rest of the scenes into so that they have this little navigation bar. Now, while I'm at it, I want to add this scene into my navigation. So I'm going to control click on my prototype cell and tell it that you're going to send me to detailed view. And this is going to be a show segue. The show segue means we might pass information from here to here, but we're going to show this information on the screen to the front. There's a few other types of segues. You'll actually see a different one, hopefully, in my next video. Okay, so now that we've got this view, or we've got this navigation bar at the top, let's go ahead and center this, put it up near the top, drag it down, and remember this is going to be a comic cover, so those dimensions look about right. I can clean it up later if I want to. And then down here I could put any sort of details. I could put star rating. I could put all kinds of things. I'm not going to go crazy with that right now because all I want to do is pass a little information between screens and show detail for one of these comics. Okay, so here we are. We've got this. This has been connected. This is all connected. I think we're ready to run. And you can never run too many times. I promise. Fat as I am, I'm going to tell you, you can never run too many times. Just keep running. Because every time you make a major change, you want to make sure that you didn't break anything. Okay? And oh, look at that. We transition. And then we can go back to the comics list. And we transition, and we can go back to the comics list. So that is your navigation controller at work. Well, that was strange. Okay. Wonderful. So now, let's go ahead and we've got our title to our nav bar. Let's talk about the actual segue. This right here, these are segues. So we're going to go to our TableView Controller because this is where everything's really happening. We did a lot of editing in this yesterday, or excuse me, last video. Yesterday, today, 5 minutes ago, whenever you did it. We did a lot of editing in this. But we want to come down to, look, Mark is right here. Mark gave us a navigation spot. Mark is so nice. So then what we want to do is say, okay, they gave us this function right here, this override function. So I want to get the new controller using segue.destination view controller, and you'll see exactly what that looks like right now. We're going to do a couple of things. One, we're going to get an index because we want to pass a comic. Well, we're going to be passing a comic from an array. So let's find our index first. So index, let index path equal TableView dot index path for selected row. Perfect. Man, that makes it so much easier, doesn't it? So what we did was we said whatever row we pick in the table view, we're going to use that for the index. Okay, and then we're going to let detail view, or just dview controller, my detail view controller, equal. Here's where we're going to use that little bit of code that they gave us. Segue dot destination as exclamation point, and then this is a detail view controller. Okay, so our destination as a detail view controller. Great. It's mad at us because we created those and then didn't use them. We're about to. So then we're going to set destination view controller dot comic. If you remember, in our detail view controller, we had an object called comic. We left it empty because we're going to fill it later. Here's where we're putting in there. Comics, this is that array of comics. Index path dot row. So now this says we're going to take the comic from the index, so take the comic from the row that we selected, and we're going to pass that to our future view controller. This is our detail view controller. So let's see, when we pass it, we come here. Oh, comic. Okay, so this variable, comic, gets whatever comic we just got from the comic table view controller. So now we got to do a couple of things with this. First off, we're going to load in all of that comic information. Mark is going to come back. Not marked. Mark is going to come back, and he has for us more private methods. I can spell. Okay, so I sure cannot spell. Private function. So now we're just going to call this, I don't know, load comic. Private function, load comic. It's not going to take any arguments. And we're just going to say, we're going to be fancy. We're going to set the title. We're going to set the title, self.title, equal to comic dot, and we have all these things that we described or that we created for comic. So comic dot name, and then detail comic image gets comic dot cover. Okay, I would, if it were earlier, I would detail comic image dot image was so close. I would tell you to build it right now and show you, and then you would see it built. And then I'd be like, oh no, what happened? We created this private function, this private method, but then we never called it. We need to go up to view did load so that when it loads, when the screen loads, we actually load the comic. And then now, if we did everything right this time, we should see simulator comes up. Then we get our white launch screen. And I mean, we had this before, so you know, nothing special. But Infinity War, this came up to our title. Our image filled in. Title, image filled in. Something I thought was cool that I didn't know happened. This back button up here, it actually tells you you're going back to the comics list. But here, since this title is really long, it shrinks down to back. That's kind of cool, frankly. But that's the basics of it. That is navigating from one page to another. My next video is actually going to be adding a page, a scene where you can actually add information and save information locally to the device. So if, for example, I wanted to add more titles and images, I could upload them into the app and I would have a whole list and I could add to it, and every time I booted up the app there would be all the ones that I left last time. We'll do that next time. It is very late. Have a good night. Hope this helped a lot.